course, delighted, sort of our host of this conference and the Bled Strategic Forum. Great to have him with us, the president of Slovenia, of course, Borut Pahor, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. President, great to have you with me, fresh from Poland, fresh from the impressions that you brought with us. And of course, we are going to start the Bled Strategic Forum not with a light topic, quite on the contrary. The future of Europe. The future of Europe is what we are going to talk about within the next 45 minutes with many pertinent, very interesting and current issues. But before we do, Mr. President, I would invite you up on stage for a 5-minute initial remark to kick off the session. The floor is yours.
Ali, Kersti, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I have always been, I am today, and I think I will be forever, very great supporter to European idea. I think at the moment, and this moment is now lasting for a couple of years, this European idea is in some sort of crisis. And this crisis, standstill, is not sustainable. I mean, I can meet some leaders who do feel that maybe this will be the status of European Union forever. I don't think so. Sooner or later, this status could go one or other direction, or will mean the decline of the great European idea, so to be together and to go to the future challenges together, or to go once more apart and faces all those challenges, at the national level. I would like to say at the very beginning, Ali, that being a great supporter of European idea, I would like to see in the future, not in 10 years, but maybe already in the terms in office of the new Commission, some sort of new constitutional process, some sort of new convention on the future of Europe. This is my idea for the beginning of this dialogue. I'm not advocating the same type of debate that we had back in 2002 and 2003 and ended with the draft constitution, but something similar. From the podium here at Bled Strategic Forum, I would appeal to everybody in new Commission and all leaders across Europe to think about some sort of new convention on the future of Europe, and maybe, just maybe, I would be very strong in favor, some sort of new constitutional process. Now, let me be very clear on one thing. I know that at the beginning of the work of European Commission, Ursula and others could not focus right at the beginning on the strategic issue of future of Europe itself. Before that, I think we have to solve two issues. Brexit, number one, and illegal migration, issue number two. If we would be successful in dealing with these two issues, and we will debate it afterwards, I think there will be enough confidence among people across Europe to finally think once again about the forum, how to get together and make a new step as far as the new, or different or better, more efficient European Union will be tomorrow, to be efficient, inside and outside in world affairs. So with this wish of mine, I would like to conclude this introductory statement. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. And the concern that you have for the future of Europe, I think, very much rang through in your remarks. A couple of issues that you've touched upon. We'll go into a bit more detail, of course, but first, President Kaljulaid, your initial remarks.
Excellencies, friends, brothers and sisters, far too often, to my taste, I hear this question, is our union useful? Where do we go with our union? Why is our union inefficient, ineffective? Why doesn't our union decide quicker? And looking for the answer is actually like searching for your glasses. They are normally right under your nose, in fact. Try to imagine we didn't have a European Union. And let's say we try to do a European-level project. Like, for example, let's take an example from environment. In the 90s, in Europe, rivers and lakes were polluted. Europe decided we need to have them clean. Now, if we didn't have a European Union, how would it go? It would go this year. For 3 years, we will search the place where to have a conference of cleaning up the rivers and lakes. 2 years, we'll set the agenda. 1 year, we'll come to the conclusions on how we will take the decisions. And the year after the event, we will discover there was no implementing force behind our decision. I think beside that, we don't have to discuss whether we need our union. Of course, for small countries, European Union is also a strong enhancer of our sovereignty because all of our good ideas can be quickly leveraged through political and economic mechanisms of the European Union. But the underlying principle, European Union is much more efficient and effective than an ad hoc alternatives could ever be for our continent, is there. I would like to apply this European spirit to two most persistent problems in our societies. One is mentioned today numerous times already, it's climate change. If this planet is to be saved, I don't see any other mechanism than the European Union, the richest and biggest common market, will come to a common decision to stop polluting. And by its decision, it will skew the market and force the private sector and the technologies and the markets to adapt to this decision of the political leadership. And by paying the cost for this adaptation, Europe will be able to develop technologies until they become profitable. And then the rest of the world will adapt them because of economic reasons. I don't see any other option. It rests on our European shoulders, and I'm proud to take this responsibility. The other example I want to bring, and that's my last one, is the common job market and European experience of working indifferently from where you come from and being a citizen of which country. Why this is an important element is that nowadays we see that when the industrial period ends, the new digital period of work, this is global. We work wherever, and we work in different states and continents at the same time, and we live wherever. Geography and job, they're not connected anymore. We in Europe have at least some experience on allowing portable pensions, portable healthcare. We are much more ready than any other rich economy or rich economic area to accept the challenge of becoming the safe dock for our global citizens, to provide for social market economy services for them wherever they find themselves. And this is vital because with the technology cycle shortening, transformations like from agriculture to industry, from industry to IT will come more often and more often in the future. Europe is the best place to tackle them. That's my case for the Europe. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for the two initial statements. Clearly a very passionate plea for the relevance of the European Union going forward. President Pahor, in this very chair that you're sitting, last year, almost to the day, I sat across from Michel Barnier, the EU chief Brexit negotiator, who back then said, you will remember, a deal is imminent. A deal between EU and Brexit is imminent. I'm quite optimistic that we will see a deal fairly soon, he said. Made international news, made headlines. Now, of course, recently he said, well, that optimism is gone. I'm no longer optimistic that we can avoid a no-deal scenario. Boris Johnson, the British Prime Minister, has suspended UK Parliament until October 14th. Many of its critics blaming that he's undermining democracy in doing so. What's your take?
Well, a deal has been reached, and I think was a good, and it is still a good compromise. I don't believe, as far as I know, that 27 countries could agree on some amendments that would satisfy Prime Minister and the majority in British House of Commons. So before anybody would suggest to start amending the agreement, I would like to see some sort of guarantee that we wouldn't start something that we could not finish. So, Great Britain has its own right to decide, and we have to respect it. Maybe also the decision to Brexit with no deal whatsoever. Well, we have some responsibility also to maintain, some sort of strong coalition of 27 countries, not to start debating something that we are not able to solve, and to take care about our interest.
But the suspension of Parliament until October 14th
I don't
rather
want to
unconventional.
comment on their, decisions. It's their right to do so. I would like, at the end of the day, some sort of agreement, some sort of, deal which would, satisfy also the House. But as I said, at the moment, I cannot see a good alternative, for example, Irish backstop. And until Taoiseach, the Ireland Prime Minister, would not say it is good, will not be good also for us.
President Kaljulaid, we are set, the UK is set to leave the European Union by October 31st. Not much time left to reach a deal. Boris Johnson doesn't seem to be very much in favor of opening new chapters. Now, the move, I want to come back to this, because we are in Europe and we uphold laws and we uphold democracy, not just here on this continent, but all across. The move to suspend Parliament until October 14th, basically rendering Parliament useless and ineffective in dealing and debating this debate. How do you assess this? Is this not a danger to democracy within Europe?
Internal policy is each country's own business, and I don't know enough of the British constitution even to comment on that, but at least this has been drilled into me in university. Don't comment if you don't feel comfortable that you are at least 5% smarter than the rest of the auditorium. Doesn't need to be the truth, but at least that is recovered. So I don't say that. But on the agreement, what is on the table, this agreement, as Michel Barnier has said numerous times, is a direct derivate of the conditions set down by Prime Minister May while defining what does Brexit mean for the UK, done straight after the referendum. So stemming from that, this is what we can do. More we cannot do. So unless some of the conditions set by the UK shifts, there is, basically no opportunity to renegotiate. If something shifts, we can be back to the table, and I'm quite sure that Europe will grab the opportunity like a flash in that case. But the ball is not in our court, unfortunately. What concerns the effects of the Brexit, then Slovenia, Estonia, we are the countries who economically directly cannot assess it, because, if you look at our macroeconomy, it doesn't show up. We are part of the Nordic market, you are part of the bigger German and Balkan markets. There is a re-export element which we cannot gauge from the current viewpoint, which means that we cannot even predict, because we have far too little information on direct impact. But of course, in this case of uncertainty always has a cost, and the cost tends to be higher for smaller rather than the bigger economies, particularly on small open economies.
President Power, just your assessment. You're an experienced politician. You're talking to your EU friends and partners. How optimistic are you that a no-deal Brexit can be avoided by October 31st?
It's up to Prime Minister to decide, finally, I think. I'm not optimistic at the moment. I think that, really, for the very first time, I do think that hard Brexit could be the reality, and it is an obligation to Brussels to then think about our interest. So let me say once again, what is important for us is to maintain this consensus among 27. This Brexit, hard or soft one, could not jeopardize other issues that are in front of European Union.
And indeed, the European Union, unlike on some other issues and fronts, have remained a very unified front here. We have Josep Borrell in the audience. We'll have him on stage later on, who will also testify to the fact that EU has stood firm and in union when it comes to Brexit. How optimistic are you, President Kaljulaid, that a no-deal Brexit can be avoided by the end of October?
Well, the track record of the European Union is actually such that we go to the situation where most journalists, think tankers think we are on the brink. But we know that this is the decision-making point, and you know why this is this way. Take, for example, euro area. Euro area was created technically weak originally, not because the specialists didn't know it's technically weak, just because there was not enough understanding in the electorate that we need to fulfill certain more technical conditions to make euro area strong. It took a crisis to make this visible. As soon as it was visible to citizens, politicians could demonstrate. They could show the leadership and respond. This is the way Europe functions. This is not inefficient. This is because we are democracies.
We are democracies and we are unified. President Power,
May I
please.
just say one thing?
Sure.
If I would be asked, this is the matter of British people, but I would like British to stay with us. But it's their decision and should be respected. Maybe, just maybe, I don't know. I think nobody knows. Maybe in next couple of months, they will figure it out how to go for a second referendum. But I do respect those who are very critical to this alternative. I've been to London in mid-February, and I've seen different opinion on this alternative. The problem is that then people would have a feeling that they are asked a certain question until they answer correctly. This is not good for democracy.
Well, this discussion can also be followed live on live stream, and I'm sure a few people in Great Britain are watching us right now. So if they take it to heart what you're saying, perhaps some minds will be changed here. Now, we talked about union. We talked about how the unified front of Europe, President Power. But of course, there's one topic, migration and refugees, one topic where Europe has shown cracks, certainly after 2015. It has divided the European Union in those who have taken in refugees and those who have categorically denied taking any. What do you see on that front? Are we getting closer, at least, to a unified stance on this front?
In a way, it is amazing to me that 10 years ago, during a financial crisis, severe economic crisis, Europe has been capable to go through the crisis with very intelligent decisions, and we are now out of crisis as the rest of the world. Meanwhile, we are not capable to deal with the migration issue. Thanks God, now we are not dealing with the same amount of migrants as we had to deal back in 2015. Nevertheless, we are now facing illegal migrations, and I think Europe could do more on the external borders and so on. But let me say once again, as I stated at the very beginning, if Brexit would not be solved in a proper way, if especially illegal migration would not be solved in a proper way, I would very much support some sort of consensus of 27 on this very issue. Then I think there will be lack of confidence to deal with all other questions, including this strategic issue of future of Europe and enlargement and climate change and so on. So this is extremely important.
And if we're looking at the current events in Syria, we have the Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu in the audience and later up here on the podium as well. Clearly, some things are brewing once again, and the refugee issue perhaps will be back very much prominently on the agenda. President Kaljulaid, how do you see the migration refugee front in Europe? Are we getting closer? There are some countries like Hungary, like Poland, who said we're not going to take any refugees whatsoever. Is that really solidarity? Is this European solidarity?
Two comments. First of all, I think Europe would have been even in a worse position to tackle the migration crisis if it had not been that Europe noticed already 2 decades ago that we need a common European migration fund. The first period of European migration fund actually ended already 2004. And I can tell you, I was the auditor of that fund at the Court of Auditors. Nobody was interested. Only a couple of Italian journalists turned up for the press conference when we were talking about these results. Results were Southern European countries created, with the help of the European Migration Fund, a system which at least helped them to start to cope with the migration flow. More Nordic countries like Sweden or UK, who had a lot of experience in accepting refugees and migrants, they experimented with mentoring of the migrants, etc., tried to kind of enlarge their portfolio of the tools to deal with the migration. So, ceteris paribus, I think Europe already had done a great job in order to be more prepared. But of course, climate change, I mean, think of Lake Chad, for example, all other areas. This is an issue which means that migration will be there to be forever. Solutions, yes, part of the solution is how we deal within the Europe with it. But I think the High Representative Federica Mogherini has convinced us Europeans to pool what we do, for example, in Africa. We work mostly through, in consolidated format, through African Union. African Union has taken a decision to establish 4 freedoms. My suggestion to my African brothers and sisters has been establish straight away also the 5th, the digital freedom. They will have free movement of people, which means that they will also be able to allocate workforce legally within the continent, because what we see is only the froth on the underlying, I mean, kind of muddy waters, which we don't understand really well. This way we can see that, I mean, Africa is developing itself. It is ready more than before to take it in their own hands to make sure that their people don't have to leave, but they can be allocated a better opportunity within the continent. Because I always get pretty angry when we talk about migration as a problem. I mean, it's somebody's brain drain. And all these people, they are people who are entrepreneurial. They are, I mean, probably more active than those who are left behind. I mean, we cannot allocate the jobs, their brains and their capacities would be able to give them back home. So never forget, never be insensitive. Our migration, their brain drain, let's work together on it. And we are doing a great job on it. Of course, I mean, always you need to do more and quicker, but let's not neglect what we are doing.
And the cooperation between Europe and Africa here, of course, is indeed vital in bringing about the cooperation needed in order to avoid that brain drain and perhaps destabilize also the political atmosphere here in Europe, President Power, because there's no denying that the Euro crisis, but certainly the refugee crisis in 2015 has done something to the political landscape in Europe. We see populist movements on the rise, populist parties on the rise. That is something that must concern you.
But this is good illustration of the lack of consensus back in Brussels. If there is no consensus on big issues, then, 27 countries are pushed to search for their own solutions. So we should not just blame, some politicians to search for national exit from the crisis. This is, in a way, the product of insufficient Brussels politics. But that is why I'm saying, let us now put, heads together and rethink all the issue and try to get out some sort of consensus on burden sharing, because this is the issue. Here, Europe is split, and try to get some sort of solution that everybody would be quite satisfied with it.
That sounds great, but how? How do you do that?
Well,
how
I
do you
think
force
this is
politicians who
the
don't want to
most
subscribe?
one of two most important domestic, task of new European Commission. And I think Joseph is there. I hope you will do some great job there in next couple of months. But I think this is one of your priority at the beginning of your term in office.
So the first recommendation has already passed on,
Sorry,
Josep Borrell.
sorry.
Please take good notes.
He's
right there, listening very intently to what the issue.
Yeah.
But Kersti Kaljulaid, President Kaljulaid, I want to get your stance here, of course, on the rise of populism in your country as well, all across Europe.
A rise of populism, I may come to that as well, but I would like to turn a little bit back when the migration crisis hit Europe. Estonia was among of them who was not even part of this first European Migration Fund. Hence, we were totally unprepared, and we are very grateful to our Greek and Italian friends, together with whom we put together a system through which Estonia could participate in redistribution of the refugees. So we took part. We also contribute to Frontex. We also worked with Slovenia, with our police force, to help keep order on the borders. And we learned very quickly and rapidly. On the other hand, what I'm very much agree with is what my friend Borut said. It has to work to everybody's satisfaction, and it also has to work to the satisfaction of our people and the people who are coming to these countries. And to satisfaction of our people means that our cultural space needs to be protected. I mean, it cannot change radically the way our societies look and act because there are newcomers. This is one from our viewpoint. The second thing is our redistribution scheme, the involuntary one, did not respect the will of these people. The will of these people, if they have left everything behind or have nothing, left there, coming from Syria, for example, it's obvious they want to get the best conditions, which, can be found in Europe. And unfortunately, these conditions were not in our country. So we immediately faced a huge problem of secondary migration, which means that this solution was suboptimal from the viewpoint of the refugees themselves. And I think we also need to keep this in mind. But all in all, I totally agree with Borut. We absolutely have to have a common agreement. Otherwise, we cannot keep the Schengen system functioning. Schengen system is something which Europeans generally love. And I think if we can link these two more closely, and I think here it is more felt than maybe in my part of Europe that it's an issue, even if people regularly forget to take their passports when they want to go from Malmö to Copenhagen. But anyway, we need indeed, this is the first and foremost pressing short-term issue in the hands of the Commission. I don't invite the Commission and the incoming High Representative at all.
President Power, you wanted to jump in here.
Ali, back in, I think, or 2009 or 2010, we had 13 meetings of European Council on financial crisis. Mm-hmm. What I do miss at the moment is to keep thinking and searching for the solution on migration issue. Mm-hmm. It is just there on the agenda, no consensus back home. So it is obvious that national politics are there to then address the issue.
So I'm hearing a lack of leadership then within Europe.
Well, let us hope that a new Commission, also the Council and the House, all three would work together to come to the compromise solution. Kersti has said, frankly, there are differences among us, how to, split the responsibility. But definitely there is should be some sort of solution. Mm-hmm. But we have to work on it, work, and then finally I think something will come up. So I really think that next European Commission could do more than previous one.
The hopes are very high for Mr. Borrell, getting higher with each statement here on this panel. He seems rather relaxed, though, still.
Well, without this issue solved, I think the Commission will be paralyzed and nothing could be solved.
Very good. Now, please.
If I may, I forgot to talk about populism. And the bad news is, even if we solve the migration crisis, populism will not go away. Because, before there was the migration issue, for example, in my countries, there was the question of the gay rights. There is always the question of women, their place in society and politics, and all other these kind of issues where people have strong feelings and opinions, which allow us to polarize societies. So we don't know what will be the next question. I think there will always be the next questions, unless we really get the urgency of the climate change issue, and then we will see the new, main consensus forming around the climate issue. This is the only common denominator I can see, whichever color you are, whichever position you take in the current organization of the society, which can actually bring back a mainstream consensus. I think it will be somehow green.
And consensus in Europe is key, because at the end of the day, we are not an island on ourselves. Quite on the contrary, we have the United States, of course, we have China, we have India. We are in the midst of Russia, of course. We are in the midst of this, and we are dealing perhaps for the very first time with the US president, who doesn't see Europe as a partner, more as an adversary, as an economic rival, if you will. Now, how do you assess we are dealing with transatlantic relations, European foreign policy? How do we deal with the US president who no longer thinks of Europe as a partner?
Well, probably you do expect some, political correctness in my answer, and you will get it.
Well, whatever answer you want to give me. I mean,
American people have voted, and the Trump administration is doing its job. We can agree and we can disagree. I am a strong supporter to Paris Agreement, to nuclear deal agreement, and similar agreements, and I'm very supportive to multilateralism that Madam President has mentioned rightly before. Okay, American president is not so keen about, but let me tell you one thing. Nevertheless, we have to work with Americans. This is much more than 1 or 2 terms in office. Here and there, I think we are historically, in a way, connected. And I would go with the issues and solutions to the issues where we are compatible.
Just clearly, before I go to President Kaljulaid, the news that an occurrence that made international news. Slovenia erected a Donald Trump statue in Slovenia. Is that my understanding? Is that,
not Slovenia. I mean,
not Slovenia.
No.
Okay.
It's private enterprise.
It's private, not the country, of course, not the country. So a private piece of art has been made. President Kaljulaid, can I also ask you about the role of Europe in the world, and particularly against the backdrop of a White House that sees Europe on the eve of 70th anniversary of NATO, by the way. How do you think Europe can move forward here?
First of all, even President Bush's steel tariffs did not ruin transatlantic partnership, if you remember correctly. So this is not the first time we see these kind of things. Second, it's quite obvious that the strategic risk for the liberal democratic world nowadays stems from those countries who are not democratic but have a good command of technologies. And namely, I think it is China. It is obvious that we in the free world have a common disadvantage over the future development of, for example, military capacity. It's an advantage for our societies that new technologies are nowadays created in free world, in private sector. I mean, DeepMind investors are as rich as most states, so they do quite a lot of independent development. This is new for free societies. When nuclear weapons were developed, we always knew who was developing what, and somewhere where rockets were developed, we knew who was developing them and who will succeed. In free world, we don't nowadays know who will create the best narrow AI or even singularity. We don't know. We haven't even agreed how we will control and monitor, for example, if somebody really manages to create singularity. We don't have a mechanism in place. But China controls technology development. We must consciously, commonly overcome it. And here our interests are totally aligned with Europe and with the United States to keep our liberal democratic world alive, even if, strategic risks are elsewhere, not in Europe, which might explain some feeling and understanding that Europe matters less In fact, we still do matter to each other. It's just different relationship.
You mentioned China. The ongoings in the current events in Hong Kong, of course, are being closely watched all around the world. Would you wish that Europe would take a more assertive stance here in terms of projecting its values?
Yes, always. You wish we could do more. In case of Ukraine and Georgia, I also wish we could do more. Fact is, we will do what the common political consensus allows us to do. But it's not worthless. May I remind you that 40 years ago, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, 45 citizens of these countries, sent out a letter which became known as Baltic Memorandum. We sent it out. It was only a single letter. Only 45 people dared to sign it. But it sparked a new discussion in the free world. In the European Parliament, it was Otto von Habsburg who, at the second try, managed to pass a resolution calling for the referendum for independence in the Baltic states. In US, the year 83 was declared the Baltic year and really celebrated, which means that when the Soviet Union reached the point where it basically broke up because of, the unsustainability of the communist model, then the world was ready to embrace and accept our re-independence and to work with us and help. So every small step we do, however small it seems in the face of the challenges, might be the decisive step for the future. We don't know it. I know diplomacy is painfully slow and we'd like to make the world the perfect place, but this is how things are.
The realities for it.
Right. I just wanted to agree with Kersti. Let me say one more word on trade wars. I think this could lead us to a global recession. I think this is a good moment for everybody to think how to limit this danger. Maybe German recession at the moment is just technical one. Maybe the slowdown of world economy is just, ups and downs, but could be also a direct product of trade war. So let us be reasonable and do utmost to get to the solution. Now, we are very critical sometimes to those who are not so much in favor of multilateralism. But we have to acknowledge, and Madam President said it in her speech, we also, who are advocating multilateralism, we have to do more to, to go with the time, to reform institutions and relations, not just to blame those who are against them and it's our responsibility too. I think we should acknowledge this.
And multilateralism, of course, is going to be the topic in the panel that will succeed this conversation. We're almost running out of time, but President Pahor, I want to ask you, of course, we are in Slovenia. I want to talk to you about EU enlargement, possible enlargement. We are in Slovenia, of course. There are many countries in the Western Balkans who would aspire to follow in your footsteps. You joined the European Union in 2004. Albania, North Macedonia, Kosovo, Serbia, the list goes on. There are many, Montenegro, many countries and many delegates that we have here in the audience want to join the European Union. Can you give them any hope that at least accession talks, that at least there will be some constructive steps that the EU will take those countries in?
Probably Turkish foreign minister will not be satisfied with my answer, but also his president knows my view on this. I would make a difference between Western Balkans on one side and Turkey and Ukraine on the other side. I would go with a special status as far as Turkey and Ukraine are concerned, and with full membership as far as countries in Western Balkans are concerned. If you would look at the map of Europe, you would see that beside Switzerland, Western Europe is an island, not to be included in EU at the moment. My suggestion to everybody is to think about Western Balkans as not as a package, but more as a region, not just country case by case. I'm not optimistic if EU will not decide to keep this enlargement ongoing. There will be some, conflicts back in the area. So I think would be wise not to now speed the process. That would be just too much to expect, but to have this process on the agenda and to support everybody in the region to go on with reforms, reconciliation process, and so on and so on. So I wouldn't, slow down the process of enlargement as far as Western Balkans.
And just to follow up, and then I'll bring in President Kaljulaid. Of course, there's another dimension. If Europe leaves a power vacuum, if a vacuum of influence, if you will, in these countries, there are other countries, absolutely, China, Russia, ready to step in. The responsibility on the part of Europe is not small here.
Absolutely. Just look Bosnia, and maybe even or Republika Srpska. If you would travel through Republika Srpska, you would see, Putin in every house. It is crystal clear that the leverage that Russia would like to have in Western Balkans is huge. Is there. So we would like to invite our American friends not to go out, and European Union to stay in.
President Kaljulaid, EU enlargement, what steps do you think ought to be taken? What steps do you think realistically will be taken?
As a member of 2004 class, it would be immoral if I stayed, we close the bus doors and drive away. We'd never do that in Estonia. Absolutely never. So we support continuous enlargement, strong conditionality, by the way, and we'd really like to remind that there are other countries than Balkan countries who are looking to Europe and asking, can we one day have a chance? Think of Georgia. Think of Georgia. Georgia, similarly to Western Balkan countries, has had its fluctuations in how developed the rule of law, democracy, or media freedom is, and sometimes situation looks more hopeful, sometimes it looks less hopeful. But I think we cannot close the door on them neither. And the main reason I think it's extremely important for all of us not to close door on them is that they are partially occupied. And this is not even totally frozen conflict. There are some perturbations right now in South Ossetia, which are ongoing. So if Georgia manages to be as good reforming country as Western Balkan countries, then the only reason we are refusing to give them a perspective, albeit a distant one if we so wish, is that we are afraid of the Russian reaction. And this is not what I want to have, because this is the signal that it is still Russia who dictates who can and who cannot choose Western orientation. I think we need to stand up for these nations. Mm-hmm.
President Kaljulaid, we're almost out of time. You started this session with a very passionate plea on behalf of the European Union, these 500 million people and the 28, probably soon to become 27 nation bloc. How optimistic are you that Europe, you were just in Poland yesterday, as we said, you marked the 80th anniversary of the start of World War I, World War II. Have we learned the lessons? Will Europe going forward still be a force for good, a strong, vibrant player on the international scene?
If you ask European Union, then my answer is definitely yes. If you ask Europe in a wider term, then I missed one president yesterday. President Steinmeier was there, humbly offering his apologies to Polish nation. I would have really liked to see my own eastern neighbor there as well, talking a little bit about how they see the past and the Soviet role in Baltic occupation, in Gulag, and all these lives who were lost at this time. So Europe in a wider picture, no, we still have a situation where there is a country who doesn't respect the rule of law in international scene and who prefers power to the sovereignty and right to choose for everybody. And this is a situation we need to pay attention to and work with, not to despair. But this is partially also the reason why I feel that we have absolutely no other alternative than to stick together.
President Pahor, the future of Europe, that's what we discussed in the past 45 minutes. Your final remarks, how optimistic are you about the future of this political entity and project?
I am optimistic because there is no alternative. At least there is no good alternative, who would, maintain peace and stability and predictability. But it's up to us, not just idea for itself. It's up to us to think and to search, elaborate on the future of this idea. I think the Europe is still the best place to live, and it's up to us to develop this idea that also our children and the children of their children will live in peace and stability.
And we have, yes, please. And indeed, we have many young leaders here in the audience who have listened intently and carefully to what the two European leaders had to say about the future of Europe, ending on an optimistic note. Let's hope we'll carry it that way. President of Estonia, Kersti Kaljulaid, and the President of Slovenia, Borut Pahor, thank you so much. This is your applause. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Now, ladies and gentlemen, after this session, we're not going